Welcome back, everybody, to another Sunday live stream. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Devin from Archer Components, who's created a pretty interesting product. It really, I think the way I would describe it is if you combine friction shifting with electronic shifting, because it's so hackable and versatile. We're going to talk to Devin to hear about the backstory, how it developed, and where it's going. But before we have him on, thanks again to our Patreon supporters who keep the lights on, and to everyone that has bought merch. We still have a ton of patches. We just came out with this goofy, I'm calling this the Street Fighter 2 edition of the Party Pace sticker, as well as our faux supple tubing stickers. So if you're into the supple life and just having goofy fun stickers on your bike, definitely check out the merch store down below. All that said, let's meet our guest, Devin. How's it going?
Howdy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, Devin, you're from Santa Cruz. What's the weather like over there? It's probably much warmer than it is here in Montana.
It's cold, man. It's 54 degrees right now and cloudy. I'm wearing my winter flip-flops. It's brutal. It's brutal.
That's heat stroke weather here.
Yeah, we're freezing. No, it's gonna rain. Hopefully we get a little bit more moisture out in the hills. I gotta just let you know, I do have a 3-year-old downstairs, and there's a real good chance that he's gonna interrupt us at some point during this whole thing. But hey.
It's the nature of the live stream. Okay, so let's talk about Archer. Why does Archer Components exist?
That's a really good question. We like to have fun, and we are geeks on bikes, and we like robots. So we, you know, my best friend from college and I, he had this crazy idea, and I had come back from living in Ecuador. I was in Ecuador for 6 years, and had come back kind of suddenly, landed in Santa Cruz. My wife's from here, and we didn't really know what we were doing. She got a quick job. I was taking care of our kids, and like, you know, after being here for about a month or so, Brandon calls me up. He's like, you know, come down. I want to show you something. I get down there, and I was living a very analog life in Ecuador, right? Like I had like an 86 Land Cruiser, no smartphone, you know, V-brakes, like just, yeah, it was not a digital life at all. But it was awesome. But anyway, I come back here, and he shows me this prototype of this like hacked together electronic shifting thing. And I look at it and I'm like, that's just, who on earth wants that, man? Like, I don't get it. I had totally missed DI2. Like DI2, I had no clue that anything like that had even existed, because I just wasn't plugged into the bike world. And so yeah, he kind of like explained a little bit more about where the industry was going and why that happened. And then I got a chance to kind of play with it, and all of a sudden, like the possibilities opened up, and you start to see like, oh, wait a second, this has a lot of applications, right? It's not just cross compatibility. It's also folks with arthritis or range of motion issues with their wrist or whatever. You know, not everybody who rides bikes is a 35-year-old man, right? Like, everything is designed for man hands in the bike world, but like, there's a lot of folks that ride bikes. So electronics seem to kind of scratch that itch. So Brandon's a mechanical engineer, and I'm more on the tech side of math and economics and such. And so he's like, you know, like, let's try and build this. Let's try and make this. Let's at least get to a point where the hacked together version could be something a little bit bigger, a little bit better. So yeah, that was like 2015, end of 2015. And then we went, we went about a year or so, just kind of messing around with it, trying to get some folks to buy in on this idea, you know, trying to get anyone to like pay attention to what we were doing. And then basically we had to rebuild the whole stack from the beginning. Everything that he had built originally and had his original developers do, it just needed to be refreshed. So we kind of started from scratch and built this technology platform up, and then it became real. we took a swing at it. We said, all right, let's make this real. Let's invest the money that it's going to take to actually do the tooling for all the plastic. And then once you kind of dump that cash into it, we had the technology. We knew that we could do some just-in-time manufacturing. We could source things relatively quickly. And so, yeah, just down there in the garage, we started this thing. And man alive, that first year we took some lumps, dude. Note to self, it's hard to make things. It's really hard to make things. It's really hard to make a lot of things, like a lot of the same things, like 100 times. You got to make the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the shifter, there's, the mechanical components, and there's also like the app, and all those things have to integrate well. Like, what was the biggest hurdle? Was it the moving parts, or was it getting things to talk to each other?
Dude, it's brutal. Like, you're putting the shifter in a very vulnerable spot, right? It's going to get splashed. It's going to get hosed. It's going to get submerged. And so, and mountain bikers are notoriously not dainty with their stuff. And so, yeah, we took a lot of lumps on just having the ability to keep water out of the box. And I'll tell you what, it is still an evolution. Like, no matter how many times we've changed the tools to make this thing better at keeping water out, just recently we realized and discovered and learned that the plastic that we were using before was a glass-filled nylon, right? And nylon has the ability to soak up ambient moisture. Okay, no big deal, right? It doesn't change the dimensions. It doesn't, but it soaks up a little moisture. But then to seal these things, we do this process called sonic welding, where you get this giant titanium horn, and it comes down and it hits this thing at 20,000 hertz, and it vibrates the shit out of it for like a minute, not a minute, a second. A minute would be bad, but a second. And but it melts the two pieces of plastic together. Okay, so that's all fine. But nylon, if it absorbs the water and then you weld it, you basically boil that water and you create teeny tiny pockets. And all of a sudden you've got this like ability to seep water into a housing, right? So like, we're always learning these like esoteric random things about plastic. So I think water has been probably the hardest thing for us. But I think you nailed it. The full integration of having the app, having the remote, having the shifter, having it all work simultaneously together while integrating with the folks at Apple and the folks at Google, who are then modifying their operating system that changes the way Bluetooth interacts with these things. Yeah, it's fun. We have a good time.
It's a constantly moving target.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And where are they manufactured?
So we build them all by hand.
Oh, dang. So they're artisanal.
They're bespoke. No, yes, we build them up in Scotts Valley. We've got a machine shop that we sublet some space out of. And so some of the parts and pieces come from abroad. Some of them come from here in the US. But everything kind of comes to our little facility in Scotts Valley. We've got 3 guys, Saul, Cole, and Sam. They do all of the assembly, and they do all the QC and the testing and the finishing. And then everything comes down to me here in Santa Cruz. And I do all the packaging it up and putting it in boxes and shipping it out.
Right. It's crazy.
It is. It really is. Literally, like, this is a bad idea. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Cool. Yeah, I remember when I first heard about your product, and to me, what caught my eye was that it was so hackable and flexible. A lot of electronic shifting systems, at least from my perspective, like act within the black box.
Yeah.
And you can only play within that ecosystem. It's usually very expensive, and there's no real upgrade path. So if there was a chainring combo that you wanted to run, but it wasn't supported, no luck. But with yours, it's almost like a like mechanical Lego tinker block for bike nerds.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you should see some of the crazy stuff people have done. Like, there's so we use a standard Bluetooth characteristic setting for this, and so we've got folks that have built like automatic gear shifters. So they've got a torque sensor, and then they build this little Arduino that can communicate with this thing and tell it to shift up and down based on the torque that's coming in and the cadence. It's
right. It's awesome.
Like, okay, yeah. There's no reason why we can't do that. Like, sure. And like the dropper thing, I love that you brought that back up, man.
Yeah,
you gotta make droppers.
Yeah. What Evan's referring to is on the Discord. We after the video launch, there's a big discussion. I asked people like what they wanted to see next after putting it on the Brompton, and probably the most requested hack was to see if you could DIY a wireless dropper. So Devin just sent over a shifter that how is it different from the stock shifter that enables the dropper?
So it's exactly the same as the shifter, right? So it's going to pull the cable to whichever two stops you've got, right? So you set up with the app and you say, okay, I've got this stop and I've got this stop. This is my closed and this is my open for my dropper post. But then the remote is a little different. If you press and hold either remote button, the servo will move to the open position. And then once you release the button, it'll move back to the closed position. So it really is just like press and hold, and you're like pressing the lever on your dropper post.
That's right.
And funny story, when we were doing the development to get you that remote, I had an extra remote with that firmware on it, and I just grabbed it to throw it back on my bike to go take my kids to school, and I pair it up and I'm like, start pedaling, and I go to shift and it goes cheater. I'm like, I put the wrong firmware. Let's take the remote. Yeah, this is the joy. I've got a lot of these things around, man. They all look the same too.
So it sounded like at one point you guys had considered making the wireless dropper like a real thing. Like what was the roadblock in where you decided to not go through with it?
Well, there's a couple roadblocks, right? So you got two paths. You could make a universal approach that's going to be a retrofit that anybody could put onto their bike, and then sort of like our shifter. And then the other option would be to make your own electronic dropper. Okay, so if you go down the universal route, there's two different ways that you can pull, or two different ways that you can orient your cable. Right, so it would only really work if you could put the barrel end on the servo, and then have the free end of the cable going to the pinch point or whatever on your dropper post. Yeah. And in looking at what we had there were a lot more droppers that flipped it around and had the barrel at the end, right? So then it was like, okay, so are we going to put the energy into re-engineering this to make a universal thing that would clamp onto the free end of the shift cable? Or are we going to just come up with something else? And so that was one of the kind of like, are we going to go do this or not? And then the other side of it was, if we were going to build our own dropper post, we don't know shit about doing that. So we would really need another partner. We'd need someone who we'd need a PNW or a 1UP or someone who wanted to like, let's go build some droppers that are wireless. And we've got some really, I'll tell you what, Russ, we have so many ideas that are like engineered, but we just don't have the money for tooling. Right. we call them, we say ECCAT, right? We engineering complete, but can't afford tooling. So that's kind of where it's at. Like we've got a really cool dropper design, but until we could find someone else to partner with.
Right.
And we've had a couple conversations with other industry folks, but like you alluded to, a lot of folks really don't want to talk about open approach. They don't want universal stuff because it's not in their business model to make a 12-speed thing that could then be a 13-speed thing, right?
Right.
13 kind of does that because they've got like some upgradable shifter pods, and that's really cool. But most folks are just like, no, man, we're going to do it one way, and then we're going to wait till we upgrade it, and then you're going to have to buy a new one. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. Too many people adopting like the closed box Apple approach.
Totally. Totally. I like the open source idea. I mean, we got to a point where there was a bug in our firmware and we couldn't solve it. We just couldn't figure it out. And I was like, I had this multiple days. I had this idea. I'm like, why don't we just go to the internets and say, who wants to solve this for us? This stupid bug.
Yeah.
Win a free shifter if you can figure out what's wrong with this.
Open source electronic shifting. That's awesome.
Seriously, why not? I don't
know. So you guys came out with a drop bar version recently. Is that something you guys had envisioned when you first started, or there was a demand that made itself known, and then you decided to develop the drop bar?
It was a couple things, so like all that thing, everything that I just said about folks that don't want to play nice. There's one company that really does like to play nice, and they're awesome. The folks at TRP are like, ever since the first time I met them, when I was like, I think I did like a weird guerrilla marketing thing where I stopped in at Interbike one day and I didn't have a booth. I just had a backpack full of shifters, and I'm like, take a business card. Look at this thing. But I went up to the TRP guys and they were just like, yeah, man, talk to Dave. We'll give you the CAD. Like, whatever. Like, make your thing work with our thing, and then we can sell more of our things with your thing. And this is great. So that was huge because they were really like into collaboration and they were into helping out this weird little upstart company. So that was like one big step in figuring out where we're going to go with it. The other thing is like, again, when you think through how to make a universal thing, if you're going to make a drop bar shifter, okay, so you've got a drop bar, you got a brake, you got a shifter, it's all integrated and it's beautiful. Your Shimano 105s, your Ultragers, or whatever the hell, and they're beautiful. But if you then put on some additional thing onto that drop bar, how are you going to integrate that in such a way? Because you can't take out the shifting mechanism in the brakes. And so if you do take out the cable of your shifters, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but if you take out the cables and then you shake your bars, your shifters are all flopping. So you get vestigial shifter things that are flopping around here, and you don't have. So that was a big problem. That was a big problem in my mind because I like riding road bikes, I like riding gravel bikes, but I don't like vibrations. That 86 Land Cruiser, shit, it had so many squeaks, man. It drove me absolutely bonkers. But like a drop bar bike, you want to have it clean. You want to have it look right. Mm-hmm. So with the single speed brakes that TRP had, it was like, okay, well, this is a way that we could make something that is clean and integrated and ergonomic. And there's no extra stuff. There's no appendix that's just hanging on there that we don't need anymore. Right. So I get it. It's a limited thing because you have to be able to put those brakes on your bike. You have to be into that. Right. But I think it's just a nice, clean approach to doing something.
Yeah. It's the issue of getting wide gears with a drop bar bike has basically fed our constant or content stream for about a year and a half.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
And
having an Eagle cassette on your gravel bike is pretty fun. I mean, there's some weird hills you can climb.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Like I feel, not so much Shimano, but SRAM. There's so many aftermarket products to get like a mullet setup. Like I just tested, the Ratio cable fin hack, and then there's people that make a.
Oh, you got to try those?
Yeah.
Oh, and cool.
It's elegant. It is like the best like mullet system. You can either buy the GX trailer with the fin already installed, or just buy the fin, and then you need GX and above, and there's like a little circlip in the screw, and you can swap it out.
Oh, cool.
And you can get that mountain bike range with the drop bar. It's super nice.
Nice.
And yeah, it just seems like an artificial roadblock. And I like that, the Archer system, if you want to do it electronically, you can just do it. It's pretty easy.
Totally. Yeah, I'm pumped on these things, man. Like these guys, I'm going over to our plastic molder to view the first samples on Tuesday, and I'm like, I just can't wait to have them because these are all urethane cast parts, and they've been really working well and good for testing and such. But I can't wait to see the final. It's going to be awesome.
What's the demand been like for the drop bar version?
It's been good. The tricky thing we're into now is because of COVID, getting brakes is going to be so we got this killer thing, but you can't get brakes.
It's great time to have your own business.
It is fun. I don't know, man. I have a blast with what we're doing. Like it's been such a wild trip. I'll be completely honest here. And like a year and a half ago, like, October or so of 2019, I was like, okay, this is kind of working. Like we're kind of doing okay. But with COVID and just the shuffling in the bike world, it started with Axis coming out, and all of a sudden electronic shifting on mountain bikes is actually a good thing. Like before it was a terrible idea. Now it's a great idea. Okay, cool. Right. I did it. And then having COVID and all these folks getting on bikes that they hadn't ridden in a while and they didn't work very well. And they go to the bike store and the bike store was like, dude, we don't have a 9-speed Dior shifter anymore. I'm sorry. And then all of a sudden we're there and we can solve all these problems for folks. So,
right.
Yeah, it's been cool. I don't know.
So do you have a sense of who's your most like active and engaged customer? Is it, still the hardcore mountain bikers, or is it, some interesting kind of COVID cases like you just described?
Totally. And that's the funny thing, we thought at the beginning, it was like, oh, it's going to be all the shredders. Like, nope, not even close, right? Like it's the folks who like to tinker with their bikes. It's the folks that are like, they don't have the new bike every year. Like they're like, I got the 2021, whatever. Like they're the folks that have bikes that like to ride their bikes that are, that get kind of stymied by the way the industry works. And that, I just got this 11-speed gear set. It's 1x11. I just got this. And now it's not good enough. It needs to but then also just a ton of folks who, broke their wrist or have arthritis or, for whatever reason, have some physical disability that makes it hard for them to shift. And we come in, we've got two different firmnesses of these buttons. There's like the hard one, I think is the one I sent you. And that's more like, if you've got fully functioning hands and you can really jam on it, that it works well. But we also have a light one. And the light one is really nice because you just have to touch the button. So if you've got arthritis, it's not a big deal. There's a woman here that's local. She's got it spun around so that like the buttons, she just like hits them with her because she can't move her. But she can hit them with these two fingers. So she's got it just like this.
Right.
So yeah, a ton of folks who are looking for that accessibility side of things. We've got a lot of left-handed or not left-handed folks that only have a left hand.
Right.
Folks that only have left arms or left hands. And so they're one-armed mountain bikers and they've got everything on one hand and they need to be able to shift too. So,
yeah. So was that adaptive use, did that reveal itself or was that something you guys had in mind from the beginning?
No, it totally revealed itself. I think it was, we didn't see that coming. Like I said, we really thought like, oh yeah, everyone's going to love this thing because, the shredders are going to love it. The shredders, I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. I don't know what shredders want. I just want to shred, bro.
Nice. Yeah, I had a friend that did the Arkansas gravel race, their inaugural race a couple of years ago, and by the time she was done, she had nerve damage and couldn't shift anymore. So she couldn't like actuate like a regular shifter and had to find something. And she's young. I mean, I don't know. Allie's probably she might be like in her upper 20s, but it was just so rocky and so much shifting, and she was really going for it. That she had nerve damage, and had to switch shifter styles. And I think she would have gone for some kind of electronic blip system, if she could afford it or something. But I think this brings it down to something more accessible to mere mortals.
So I mean, like I said, about the whole vestigial stuff that ends up on your drop bars. We are working on like more of a blip style button that would just be able to be put somewhere else. I don't particularly love the idea, but I know that a lot of folks want it. And so, yeah, it's out there. It's another one of these engineering complete, can't afford to win. I don't know. Let me ask you this, Russ. Crowdfunding, right? Is that still a thing? Like, could we, I don't know. We think about this a lot. Like, how are we going to make Archer components, you know, like, how do we go beyond this? I don't know. It's the crowdfunding thing could definitely be a way forward to say, hey, we've got this design. It's ready to go. It's going to cost $35,000 to tool it.
Right.
You know, who's in?
Right. You guys didn't crowdfund the initial launch. That was all your private capital. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be a viable option, like, especially since you have like physical product that's shipping, it's not vaporware, you know, and you guys put up your own money. I think that's a little bit more compelling story than, hey, we're two dudes and we've got an idea in a garage. Send us your money.
It can work.
So I think in your case, like, I think you guys could make a really compelling argument. I think, you know, people are kind of Kickstarter wary for some vaporware things, but if you've got products already, then, you know, and you can go by that reputation, then, you know, you might have a leg up. Maybe,
yeah. You know, folks say that the crowdfunding thing is like all about marketing, right? It's just a way to really kind of blast it out there. So I feel like if we were going to do it, we would need to have an updated version of the shifter along with that new remote, right? Because the updated version of the shifter, we could make this thing smaller, lighter, faster. You know, the next version of this thing might be that compelling story that could be, you know, this is the way you're going to make any road bike or any triathlon bike or any whatever bike into an electronically shifted bike. Maybe that's the way.
Yeah. Cool. So we've got some questions here in the chat. Life Dweller asks, is this only for rear shifting? Is there a system for front shifting?
Well, there's nothing to say you can't put this on your front. No, it's, you know, we haven't done that integration of having two different shifters controlled by one remote. And, you know, there's a couple of different reasons for that. One, you know, just upstart cost of like how making two things is a lot more expensive. It's twice as expensive as making one thing. But then also
turns out,
but then also you get into, you know, then you have to care more about gear ratios and you have to care more about cross chaining and all of that stuff. So we really said, okay, look, let's just get our foot in the door with the 1x rear derailleur thing. And we do have this on a lot of bikes that have 2 or 3 in the front, and they still shift that one mechanically. And then this controls the rear, which gets actuated much more frequently.
Yeah. The next stop for the Archer, after I do the dropper post hack, is the Rivendell, and it's going to be friction shifting in the front and electronic shifting on the rear.
You got some time on your hands, man.
What else is there to do? We're living in pandemic.
Seriously.
Let's see. So Sandro Chiabra asks, is Archer connected with physically impaired athletes? I know we talked about, you know, the uses for Archer with people that either have limited functionality or just one arm. Have you worked with physically impaired athletes specifically?
Yeah, so we've got a couple test units over at the National Ability Center over in Park City, and then the Shirley Ryan Labs in Chicago. So those two facilities have test units. The folks down at Alcorn Adaptive in Palm Springs, Jerry's got a couple of shifters. He's been putting them on bikes. So yeah, we're basically just, you know, anybody that wants to play nice, we play nice. You know, that one of the main reasons for that that product I was talking about, where we've got the blips, was that kind of one of the things that I'm stuck on is that the remote itself, I really feel, needs to have just kind of a generic plug a mono 3.5 millimeter stereo headphone jack, because a lot of folks with physical disabilities use adaptive switches. So they're momentary switches that they can whack with their elbow, or, they don't need to have fine dexterity to actuate. And those all have mono 3.5 millimeter stereo headphone jacks, or not stereo. And so if we can use those, then that means that remote, we can sell teeny tiny little blips that are, cool and sexy and fit wherever on your bike. But anybody who needs to use them like their own switches can just plug those in and make that remote. So it's leading into a less than elegant design of the fixture, because they're just kind of large. They're large jacks. They're kind of big hole. But I think it just like, we have a lot of internal discussions about this. Like Brandon's all about, let's miniaturize, let's make this smaller, let's make this sexier, lighter, and faster, and all that. And I'm like, but that is kind of a core element to what we're trying to do here. Alarms going off and doorbells. That one up.
It's a busy spot.
It's Sunday afternoon. What are you guys doing? Ring my doorbell.
Cool. So Tim says, sounds like a perfect type of thing for crowdfunding.
Nice.
And Sean Gold here says, you got a garage? Shut up and take my money. You're halfway there.
You're halfway there, man.
So it sounds like, capital is like the biggest obstruction to furthering what you want to do. And you have a lot of, projects or ideas that are ready to go. It's just waiting for money at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think we got a little gun shy because we started out thinking, oh man, this is going to be like just huge, and we're going to sell thousands of. Like, I remember my first cash flow, forecast. It was something like, we're going to sell 100,000 of these things. Like, come on, wait the fuck. Excuse me, I don't think we should say those things. Anyway. Like, I think you can easily overestimate the size of the retrofit market. You can easily overestimate the size of the aftermarket. I'm going to buy a product and I'm going to put it on my own bike. When we think about the bike industry, it's a massive industry, right? But a lot of the bikes are sold at large retailers, right? A lot of those bikes. And so when you think about, what is that market? How many folks are out there tinkering with their bikes and messing around and are thinking about dropping $300, $400 on a product like this? I feel like as we start to mature as a company, it's going to be easier because folks have seen us and they know that we're out there and we're not going away. But yeah, capital's the limiter, man. Unless you've got some,
This isn't Seth's Bike Hacks. We don't have that kind of money. Sorry. Or GCN. Do you? I can totally see that point where there might be fewer willing tinkerers that want to spend that money. Have you been able to work with bike shops and kind of present it as like, oh, this might be a quirky option that your customer might be interested in?
Yeah, definitely. We've got a lot of shops are into it. It's funny because I've talked to quite a few. It's often the mechanics that are into it, and I didn't really expect that to happen. But a lot of folks, they'll be like, yeah, I got this guy that comes into the shop all the time, and he always wants me to adjust his shifting, and I can just give him this and say, do it yourself. Like,
yeah. Let's see. So Prof Rider asks, is the electronic shift one cog for every tap of the button? If you hold the button down, can you shift across multiple gears?
Yeah. So it's got two functions, right? So single click, one gear, and then you can set up in the app how many gears you want to go up or how many gears you want to go down. And you can set those as two different numbers, right? So you can always like increment by 2 and decrement by 4. And then you also get to set how long do you have to press that button down to engage the quick shift to get it to start jumping. We have baked in the firmware inaccessible to you, mere mortals. We have the ability to press, and then it just goes until you release.
Nice.
But I found that, like in our testing, that it didn't stop when you thought it was going to stop, and it just didn't work right. You know, it wasn't perfect.
Right.
So
So that would be
if you send me an email and you really want to know that, I can.
That would be truly like electronic friction shifting. Where,
Oh yeah. You just kind of,
nice. So Sean Gould asked, what is the prototype process on your products? Can you talk about that a bit? What was prototyping like?
Man, we have a lot of 3D printers, and we just run the shit out of those things. Yeah, we do a lot of 3D printing, a lot of just quick iterations. Early on, when things were buggy and just rough, I stopped riding bikes with other people because it was like really embarrassing, man. Like just constantly, whoa, Devin stopped again, huh? I don't know why. Maybe he used drifter, dummy. Yeah, what's wrong with Gables, man? But yeah, so the prototype process, like, so for instance, with the DVR, right, with this new remote, so we work with our electrical engineer to do a layout for the electronics, and then we work with the mechanical engineer to just do a rough understanding of how to get that product form factor in there, right? And once those are kind of rough, then we throw it on bikes and we just ride the heck out of it, and just what works. See, like, you know, do I need to? Where does this button need to be? How does it need to fit or shape or whatever? And then as that gets refined through many iterations, I have like boxes and boxes of old 3D printed stuff, like so many just random PCBs that are sitting in boxes in the garage. It's ridiculous. But you get to a point where the 3D printing only goes so far. You know, it only gets you this kind of resolution or this kind of perfection or understanding of how the ergonomics are going to fit. And then at that point, like for the DVR, what we did was we got this company called Fathom to do these urethane casts. So they took the models, they took the CAD, and they did this really high precision print of it. And then they made a mold around that. And then they shot that mold with cast urethane. And then they took that same piece of urethane, and then they put the little rubber squishy buttons on there. This is a terrible thing because no one can actually see what I'm just pointing at a big black box. I have one that's got red buttons. I should have brought that one upstairs, but I didn't. But yeah, so we got these guys over molded. So now we've got, like, I don't know if you guys can see in there, but there's like, you can see the actuations in there, catch the light. So now you've actually got something that looks dimensionally correct, and it actually fits. You can press those buttons in and you can feel those. Again, throw it on a bike and just ride, and put it on, you know, your friend's bike, put it on your mom's bike, put it on whoever's bike. We've got a handful of folks here in Santa Cruz in the Bay Area that were early adopters. You know, they came in and they bought one of those first 100 units and just took a swing on a new company. And a lot of those folks I've maintained a relationship with, and now they just, you know, they're like my testers. And I say, hey, can you put this on your bike, and does it work? And sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no.
Yeah. Let's see. Before I get to this next question, like what dictates the final size and form of the shifter mechanism at the rear? Is it the battery? Is it the motor that pulls the cable? Like what makes it that rectangular shape?
Right. I mean, a lot of it is the linear actuator. So the linear actuator is, I mean, here, we'll use this as a little diagram. So you've got the little teeny tiny DC motor on the back, and then you've got a long lead screw that this is your traversing lead screw, right? And then underneath that is a potentiometer, which is like a little thin piece of carbon that with a grounding wiper that travels that nut, can tell the position of that little piece back to the motor. So it's like, hey, go this way or go that way. So that form factor, that long skinny form factor, defines like half of that thing. So half of this is the linear potentiometer, and and then the other half is batteries. So we use these rechargeable lithium ion batteries. They're AA size batteries. We made the decision to not try and charge it on your bike. We made the decision to not try and make it like a cartridge type thing that was proprietary, because in the beginning we didn't want to be the only source for the batteries. And these are like commodity batteries that you can get these wherever the hell you want to get these lithium ion batteries, as long as the voltage is the same. They're the same size. It's a universal size. So we felt like that really fit the ethos of what we were doing.
Right.
So, you know, in order to get the voltage, you got to put them in series. So you got to go positive and negative, and you got them in a line. And so that kind of gives you that form factor.
Okay. Gotcha.
This is kind of in the weeds, but when we first designed the system, these guys gave us like 30 hours of life, and it was acceptable, right? We were able to refine the motor control circuitry so that it drew way less power. And in doing that, we then are getting like 80 hours of life out of these things, right? In ideal conditions, they last forever. And the thing is, we could go with smaller batteries. We could do this next size down, which is the same thing that's in the remote, which is 44 millimeters long and 10 millimeters wide. Those guys would shrink the size of this considerably, right?
Right.
But going back to the capital thing, that means that we have to cut new tools for this piece. And those tools are expensive, right? So are we going to make that tiny difference in size to, and you know, it's not a tiny difference, but it's, you know, what other feature sets are we going to add to a new version that actually makes that new version more compelling? Not just, hey, it's like 10% lighter. Like, that's just not enough for me. Like, I need more than that. I need it to be faster. I need it to have more features, more integrations. Need it to do more stuff.
Yeah. Did you guys ever consider instead of like a linear motor, some kind of spool?
Yeah, actually, we were just talking about that the other day. Definitely, like, you know, having it on, having a little wind up, you know, with a motor encoder, you can definitely figure out the position and how much you're winding it. There's some deformation that happens with a cable when you start to wind it around it. Not too much, but it's, you know, it's a consideration, especially if it's under load. And I think getting that action to be oriented the right way so that you're able to spool it, but because you're going to have the cable going out this way and it's spooling this way. I feel like it's a solvable problem.
With enough money.
the linear potentiometers they're solid, you know, like that's the thing is, like, I've got units that have like 200,000 shifts on them. Like that's a long time to have. Some of my commuter bikes that, you know, my kid carrier bikes, like they've just been workhorses for years. And so I don't see a big compelling reason to go away from that.
Yeah. So Dave asks, any novel ideas like tiny passive solar panel trickle charging system? Yeah, I don't know. Could you trickle charge those batteries fast enough with like little tiny solar panels?
No, but that's the wonderful thing about having like just these random ass cells, because you can put these in a charger and have that on your solar cell, right? So you can have a spare set that you can just pop in, and the other set's being trickle charged along the way.
Yeah.
You flip that around, you say, okay, well, now we're going to put all that circuitry in here. And so that means that everybody that's got one of these things is carrying around that functionality for every ride. But how often are they actually using that functionality?
Would not work here in Montana because it's like for 8 months out of the year, it would not work here.
Done.
Yeah. David here asks, do you have any sort of process for deciding which features or design elements to prioritize? You guys must have like a feature list and, I don't know, color code them somehow.
Yeah, no, and a lot of it comes back from feedback from folks, you know, just there's a lot of email chatter that comes back to us. Like, a lot of folks have ideas. A lot of folks are telling us, you know, hey, do this, do that. So that's a big part of it. It's just, you know, talking to people, understanding what they're looking for, and then identifying those things that are compelling. You know, like I've got some ideas that are way the hell out there. Like I really want to integrate. This is like kind of the antithesis of pathless pedal, but like, what if you integrated with Strava and you knew what gear you were in, and you could upload all of your gears, and then you knew what gear where you were in with your GPS signal that you were telling back to Strava, and you knew exactly what gear you were in when you did that hill, and so then you could interpret your power from the grade of that. Like there's, you know, we could go way the hell into the weeds, but at the end of the day, what do people really want, right? They want to be able to shift, they want to be able to have cross compatibility, and they want to have something that's rock solid, that's not going to just, you know, die out on them. Right. So there's a lot of cool stuff we could do. Yeah. ECCAT, man. Telling you what. So, hey, before you go to the next question, I've got something totally bizarro, right? Sure. Kind of talking about the batteries. Okay. So the circuitry that's inside the shifter, we mainline the power directly from the batteries to the motor. So we don't have, they're just right in there, right? There's no regulator that makes it always at this voltage or whatever. We did that for a reason, because when voltage goes up, motors spin faster. Okay. So right now with your 3.5 or 3.7 volt lithium ion batteries in series, you're talking about a 7.4 to 8.4 voltage output. Okay. So that's cool. Makes the thing work really, really well. But I've had this idea for a long time, and it's finally coming to fruition. These things showed up to my office on just a couple days ago, like Thursday. So if we could take that same length, right, that same 100 millimeter length, and divide it into three lithium ion cells, then all of a sudden we could increase our speed of the motor by increasing the voltage of the system by 50%. By just changing the batteries, because all the electronics are all rated to 16 volts. We have the power. Ta-da! Check this out. Okay, these don't laugh at my hacked together battery wraps. Oh. Do some stickers, but these are 3.7 volt lithium ion, and they're 31 millimeters long. So you put them all together, and then you've got a system running at 11.1 nominal volts, which I just went on a bike ride with these things. It's so cool.
You don't have to, you don't have to change the spacing inside the shifter.
No, you don't have to change anything. You just take the old batteries out, put these new batteries in, and the thing works. It's like 50% faster shifts, and it's like automatic upgrade. I don't know. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I was like, this is amazing. It works.
It's so satisfying when you kind of noodle through something and it actually happens.
You don't know how long I've been trying to get these things. Like, obviously, I've had this idea for like a year at least, and I have gone to every single battery vendor out there. And what happened was I ended up getting this one battery vendor in Shenzhen. He's like, oh yeah, man, I've got exactly what you need. And he sends, I'm like, send me 700 of those things. Like, come on, bring them. And the box, I open up the box, and they are raw lithium cells. There's no protection circuit. There's no finish. There's no button top. There's no nothing like that you'd actually expect to see on a battery. It's just a packet of lithium. I'm like, I don't even know what to do with these. They're in a box. Like, I can't recycle that. Can I recycle that? I don't even know where to put those things. Can I ship them back to the guy? It's been a hard fought battle, man. And so I kind of like sent this sobby email to the guy. I was like, it apparently is. And he's like, well, what about these? And I'm like, you have those? And you sent me those? No. So here they are. I've got a whole bunch of them down in the garage, man. I don't know. We got to figure out what to do with them. Here's the janky thing, and I love janky things, right? Okay. So you know the charger that comes with this, right? The little 2-position charger. It's the minimum size for those things is 41 millimeters, right? So, these are 31 millimeters. So to charge them, you have to stick some aluminum foil. No.
You need a battery spacer.
You do. And I took some of the springs that are in the battery door. I just took a spring and stuck that on each one of the little chargers, and it worked. So I charged. I got to find out something that's a little like halfway less janky if I'm going to actually put this out into production.
Nice. Let's see. So we got a question here from Andy from Velocio. Have you had any kind of OEM interests?
You know, yes and no. Like the smaller bike brands are into it because they're so pinched right now. You know, when you're running Cobalt bikes and you've got a 500-day lead time on your GX sets, like, you know, because you're at the back of the line and Trek bought everything. This all of a sudden becomes more of a compelling argument. I think, you know, unfortunately, we've built this product as a retrofit product. And so if it's a retrofit product, why are you OEing it? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, we didn't really think that one through. But I mean, the cool thing about it is there's so many ways that we can re-engineer exactly this thing to fit within, you know, a chainstay or part of a frame or whatever. So we have had conversations with a couple bike brands about doing that. No one's really like jumped all in. A big kind of stumbling block with it is that the bike brand will say, well, why don't you just re-engineer the thing for us and then we'll think about it. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I need a little more commitment than that, you know, like that's a lot of work.
Yeah. Cool. So let's see. All right. We're about 52 minutes in. We've got 112 people in the chat. If you guys have any last minute questions for Devin over at Archer Components,
nice.
Put it in the comments below. Let's see.
Well, it's 111 and my mom. Okay, so just so you know, she'll probably chime in there and be like, "Hi, Devin."
Nice. So this is how the sausage is made. Yes.
This is a sausage factory.
I mean, I'm super fascinated by like how businesses start and kind of like the back end operations, because everything looks so. Looks like everything turns out like how you imagine, but the truth of most businesses is, you know, there's lots of kind of sideways trips and dead ends and
random boxes of lithium cells that are just sitting in your garage going, what the hell?
Cool. Well, what is like do you guys have a 5-year plan? Like where, like what
5 years?
You have a 2-year plan? Like what's your end vision or your future vision for Archer?
Yeah, no, I laugh, but you know, we one of our first steps, I think, really is to bring someone on staff as a mechanical engineer, as a full-time mechanical engineer. Brandon, his day-to-day, he is a mechanical engineer, licensed engineer, all that stuff, but his day-to-day is to run a whole other business that is like totally separate from the bike world. So we need someone who's going to be able to take all of our crazy ideas and then really take them to the next level. So we're in the process of interviewing some folks and trying to get a good mechanical engineer to be on staff to make that happen. So, hey, if any of you are out there want to work with our crazy process, send me an email, man. Like,
someone.
You never know, man. We're down for like moonlighting people, you know, nights and weekends. That's totally cool too. But so yeah, no, we want to flesh out the product line. We want to make this thing. We want to execute on some of these other crazy ideas. We want to figure out how to fund them in a sustainable way so that we're not just putting up all of our cash and hoping that we have hit the nail on the head with the product. We want to validate things first, you know? And then, yeah, I think that process to integrate with an OE, right? To make this something that you could put into any bike. We then need to standardize what we've done and make that thing insertable into any frame. Not, hey, yeah, you got to make a big hole in your carbon frame, or you got to do this or that. But like, if you take off the bottom bracket and you shove this thing in the bottom bracket, and then this thing goes out the back, you know, cable routing hole, now we've got a drop-in replacement. We've got something that could be integrated and it's not just, mounted to the chainstay. It's actually part of the frame. It's part of the bike. So I think that's the next step for us as a company, is to make something that is more integratable, that is standardized, that, anybody with a BSA 30 bottom bracket spacing could use. I think that's really where we need to go in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Either that or we start some other crazy idea. I mean, I don't know what I'm gonna do with all these shirts though.
Pivot. Would you consider letting a mechanical engineer student help out over the summer? You need an intern.
Yes, Burke, I absolutely would. I am a big fan. One of our first CAD designers, Jasper, he did a ton of work for us while he was still at Cal Poly. And so he was in university, and he would do a ton of work during the school year, and then the summers he was like all ours. And it was great because we got to learn from his mistakes, and he got to learn from our mistakes. We've learned a lot more now, so we can kind of guide people into that process. But yeah, absolutely, man. Send an email over to info@archercomponents.com, and that'll go to me.
Cool. So here you go. He goes to Cal Poly.
Yes. Go Mustangs, man.
Cool.
That's right.
Well, I think I'm going to take us home. Devin, thanks so much for the chat. Is there anything else that you want people to know about Archer before we sign off for the evening?
Oh, geez. I don't know. Anything else I need to know? I gotta say, I really enjoy doing this. I really enjoyed talking, doing interviews, things like this. I'm nervous as hell going into them, but then it's fun. And I've been trying to do some videos about the company, and it is really hard to do it by yourself. But how about Russ? You just start doing the videos for me, because you're like a marketing guy. You're like a video guy. Come on.
There you go.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, man. It was great to chat with you. And seriously, thanks for help pushing us towards that dropper firmware update, because that was a cool thing to go back to and relearn that stuff.
People will dig it, because in terms of the world of electronic dropper posts, there's what, 2 or 1 or how many
the Reverb and the Magura, right?
Yeah, so not a whole lot. So I think for people that want a hacky option, this little yeah,
it's definitely overkill. It's this is a lot of pull. This is 46 millimeters of cable pull to do your dropper post. You don't need them. So what do you think? What are we going to do about these batteries? What do you think? Is this an actual thing?
I think that would be cool. If it does it increase the speed of the shifting, and and you don't have to retool anything. You just have to come up with some Archer branded battery springs for spacers, and
some springs or aluminum foil. That works.
Right. I'm sure there's something at Home Depot that would approximate that length and work.
Rad.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight for another live stream. We've got a fun one. Actually, it's next week. We're going to have Georgiana Terry, the bike designer, talk about the struggles of the shorter bike rider and all the things that are involved in creating bikes that fit for those people. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again, Devin, for being on the show. And if you guys like this content, before you sign off, hit that like button. There's still 103 of you in the chat. And as always, keep the supple side down.